Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to introduce, let me tell you what's left in the program so you know how quickly we're going to move through. We have a wonderful video with a message from Ariel Sharon. We have brief remarks by David Wilder and Noam Arnon. We have a wonderful short musical program by the brilliant Laurie Kaufman, who is going to play a melody of Shlomo Carlebach, a tribute to Shlomo Carlebach in Hebron. The last concert he performed prior to his death was at Hebron. And we ask for your attention and for your patience. We're going to move very quickly. It's my pleasure to introduce the official spokesperson for Hebron, the person who is quoted every time there's an article in the New York Times about Hebron, every time CNN does a pictorial about Hebron. There's generally one person who is the spokesperson. He is an articulate young man who understands perhaps the needs of Hebron better than all of us. He lives in Hebron with his wife and 7 children. He is a graduate of Case Western Reserve, right? I have a good memory, and he made Aliyah. And if you're ever in Hebron and you really want to understand the region and the area and get a wonderful guided tour by someone who knows every stone and every curve and every building and every person who lives there, call Judy. She'll have you picked up at Yerushalayim. She'll have you driven there in an armored vehicle, and she'll have David Wilder show you what this is all about. David Wilder.
Before I begin, if it works, I'd like you to see the following 4 minutes. One of the things that many people ask me in Hebron, many reporters come in, and not only the reporters, but many very serious tourists, people who are interested in Hebron, people who want to know what's going on in Hebron. One of the questions they ask me is, why should we, speaking of themselves, why should we as Americans support you? What's so special about Hebron? And what is our connection to Hebron? Because unfortunately there are many, many people that really have lost sight of Jewish tradition, and they're not quite sure what their connection, what their kesher is with the city of the patriarchs. And one of the things, among many, that I try to explain to people is that the dangers that we're facing today in Hebron are not only ours. The dangers that we're facing today in Hebron are also yours. Now, I could stand here for a long time and delve very deeply into these problems. However, I'm not going to. What I'd like to do, very, very briefly, is to just read you a couple of quotes that I think you might find very, very interesting. For example, there is a man whose name is Hafez al-Barghouti. And Hafez al-Barghouti is the editor of a newspaper called Al-Hayat al-Jadida. This newspaper is the Palestinian Authority daily. And this man edits the paper. He said on November 23rd, 1997, we're going back 1 week, speaking about what was happening between the United States and Iraq. And I quote, "The warning signs will light up for the American people only after the American ambassador escapes defeated from the embassy's roof and after 45,000 bodies of American soldiers will return to the U.S. like airmail." He goes on. I won't read everything he says. He says, "But the Arab reality will not remain frozen. It can change and can return gifts to the U.S. via airmail. The Arab mothers will not be the only ones crying." Sheikh Yassin, who was just released from prison, after having guaranteed that he would no longer incite murder, says, "We must stand in one line, in one trench, against the one enemy. Jihad is the only way to return to our land and homeland. There is no other way." Mr. Barghouti again says, "History does not remember the United States, but it remembers Iraq, the cradle of civilization, and Palestine, the cradle of religions. History remembers every piece of Arab land because it is the bosom of human civilization. On the other hand, the murderers of humanity, the creators of the barbaric culture, and the bloodsuckers of the nations are doomed to death and destined to shrink to a microscopic size like Micronesia." Now today in Jerusalem, there's a man whose official title is the Mufti of Jerusalem. This man's name is Sheikh Akrima Sabri. And he was appointed by Yasser Arafat in October of 1994 as the Mufti on behalf of his prophet against the colonialist settlers who were sons of monkeys and pigs. Forgive us, Muhammad, for the acts of these sons of monkeys and pigs who sought to harm your sanctity. These are people who a few months ago, while I was here this summer, tried to blow up a subway station in Brooklyn. They're the same people who tried to blow up the World Trade Center. And they again and again and again say, and they mean what they say, we are going to do whatever we can to destroy America. This isn't not only a problem that I face in Hebron, it's a problem, unfortunately, that people here face walking the streets of Manhattan and Brooklyn and elsewhere. There's also another reason, though, much more important than this, why American Jews should support the Jewish Community of Hebron. Who, if not all of us, know and understand what has happened to Judaism in the United States, the powers of assimilation. So many years ago, I remember learning, and I don't remember who the philosopher was, the Jewish thinker who made these remarks, but he said, we can't give Hitler a posthumous victory. We can't wipe ourselves out. We cannot continue to do what he tried to do and fail. And many, many times, we see this continuing to happen. We see that Jews are forgetting to be Jews. Hebron does not only represent Jewish heritage, Hebron is Jewish heritage. Hebron is not only a symbol of where we began, Hebron is where we began. Why do we have so many problems with assimilation? Why do people forget they're Jews? Because they don't know what Judaism is. There's no education. And the education that we received began with Avram Avinu 4,000 years ago, where we live today. And in spite of all of the troubles and all of the hardships and everything that we've had to go through all the years, climaxing, of course, with the Shoah, with the Holocaust 50 years ago, we've come back to Eretz Yisrael and we've come back to Hebron. And if I, as a Jew, can live anywhere in the world, who would even think of saying to me that I, as a Jew, cannot live in Brooklyn, or I can't live in the Bronx, or I can't live anywhere in this country or anywhere around the world? Because if it was said so, then it would be called anti-Semitism and racism, and how can that be? However, we see that, unfortunately, we're told that as Jews we can't live in Hebron. We're told that Hebron isn't a Jewish city, and this is something that's preposterous. I think it's also very, very important to understand, and with this I'll conclude, that American Jewry still has a tremendous amount of power. And it's very important that the awareness of what's happening in Israel today is almost absurd. And I think that absurdity can be emphasized by what was written yesterday. And it couldn't have been written at a better time. What was written yesterday in the editorial in the New York Times speaking about Israel's land plan. It says Israel's nebulous land plan. The final paragraph says, and I would read it 2 or 3 times if we had more time, because you just read it once and you don't believe it. But it says, Washington is right to pressure Mr. Netanyahu to be bolder in his diplomacy, and President Clinton properly made his impatience clear by not meeting with the Israeli leader during a recent visit to the United States. Now get this. This is the New York Times. They say the Palestinians have failed to deliver on many of their own Oslo commitments, most notably the promise to combat terror. The New York Times says that Arafat hasn't done what he said he was going to do, and that he's not combating terror. But even during days of relative calm this autumn, Mr. Netanyahu and his cabinet have shown too little determination to keep Oslo alive. I think that the American Jewish community still has a lot to say. And you'll excuse me if I say so, but the best way to convince this administration and the next administration and the one after that today, the one great way to do it is that people put the money on the table. And they say, we're supporting those people. And that support isn't just moral support. It doesn't just come out from our mouths, but we mean it. And we want them to live in Hebron, and we want them to build in Hebron, and we're going to make sure they stay there. And that's something that all of you can contribute to.